So what should you do if you hate your job? Maybe you hate it, or maybe you just dislike what it is that you do or where you work, but what should you do about it? Well, in this video, I'm going to help you with that. Firstly, I'm going to share something with you that is totally astounding, and it blew me away when I first read it. Then I'm going to share with you 3 tips that's going to help you to overcome the situation that you're in and potentially find a solution for your problem. But before we get into those tips, let me share something that is quite astounding. So this is according to surveys that were done by Microsoft and LinkedIn based on US employees who were professional workers. Now, according to this study, 85% of people were considering quitting their job. Now, I think that number is absolutely extraordinary because it might as well be almost everyone in 2024. It is important for you to know that you're not alone in this situation. There are tons of other people out there who probably feel the same way about this exact situation that you're in. And there are actually tons of reasons why people might quit their job. I'm just going to share with you some of the top reasons, and some, if not all of these, might apply to your situation. So make sure you listen out for anything that resonates with you. Firstly, there is the pay. I mean, that one's pretty obvious. If you don't feel like you're being paid enough, or you haven't had a pay rise for a while and the world is getting more expensive around you, then guess what? You're going to be off about pay. There's also the hours to consider as well. Some roles have people working ridiculous hours, shift patterns that maybe people don't like, night shifts, working overtime at weekends when their friends and family are doing stuff and they want to be a part of that. That can be quite frustrating. There's also the location of the role, which can be quite frustrating. So if you live in the suburbs, for example, or in a town and you have to commute to a city in order to do your day-to-day job because they mandate you must be in the office, not only do you have to work 8 to 10 hour days, you also have to consider commuting to work, which takes another 1 to 2 hours on top of that, and at the cost of you. It's quite frustrating. There's also the family hindrance aspect. Now, this is where you feel like you don't get to spend any time with your family, mainly because of the location and the hours. So you need something that's more solid, more secure in terms of hours, that's practical for your life. There's also the aspect of the role not being challenging anymore, and that can be quite frustrating. Some people like to be challenged and pushed on a daily basis. You might find that actually in the role that you're in, you're not being pushed. You're just being told to do the same things over and over again, and it could just get really, really boring. And the final one that I have is future prospects, because actually, if you don't have any future prospects in your company, maybe you're looking for a promotion to get more money and you're potentially blocked by doing that in your company, you may find that you've run out of room to operate in that company and you might need to do something about it. Now, I'm sure that some of those reasons would resonate with you. The ones that are probably the most important are location, hours, and pay. So with that said, and with all this information, let's get into these tips. So for tip number 1, let me ask you a question. What would you do if you were suddenly not earning any money tomorrow from your job? And how would you pay your bills and expenses each month or week? The reality is that most of us would have to use our savings, or we would be in a situation where we're just not earning and we're taking a loss in life because all of our bills are still ongoing. Remember, things like mortgages, cars, and big expenses that are maybe done on finance, you can't just say, oh, I don't want that anymore, I'm going to give it up. The reality is you could have things like your car or your home repossessed if you don't keep up payments. And this ties nicely into the tip, which is don't quit your job without a plan. In other words, if you don't have any substitute income planned that's coming in that you can almost guarantee, you should not be thinking about just quitting your job at the drop of a hat. Remember, money is still needed to keep you going. So if established we're not going to quit our jobs, what we now need to do is consider our next tip. And for tip number 2, I'm going to ask you another question. Is it your company or your job that is the reason that you hate what you do right now? And this is an easy way for you to identify where the root of the problem really is. And you may already know this, but if you don't, you should look at both sides of the fence and ask yourself the questions about, do I like working with this company? Do I enjoy the company themselves? Do they offer me good things? Do they look after me? Do I like the people that I work with? Do I like my commuting setup or the hours that I work? Do they offer flexible working? And if you do, then that might be one thing to tick off, that the company is the problem. You should also ask yourself the question, looking at it from the job perspective. So for the job that you actually do, what is it about the job that you don't like? So maybe there's some part of the job that you don't like, or maybe you just hate what it is that you're doing altogether now because you've become so bored with it, or you've just never liked it. Maybe you fell into it. And in that situation, this is a little more complex, because if you have a situation with your company, you can potentially resolve that by going and doing the same job somewhere else. But you can't really do that when it comes to a job, because if you naturally hate what it is that you do, you're going to struggle in that job wherever you went. If you went to a different company, you'd have the same problem. So the root of the problem might actually be what you do and the fact that you don't like it, rather than where you work and who you're doing it for. Now, it's really important that you think about this and you write down the answers to these questions so that you can actually make an informed decision on what kind of action you need to take next, because the whole thing will actually determine what you do next. It's either going to be moving to another company, finding a different job in the same company, or maybe even finding something completely different altogether. And that brings us nicely onto tip number 3. And I'm going to ask you 2 different questions here. So the first question is this: could you provide the skills and things that you do in your full-time job on a self-employed basis? And secondly, could you create some kind of product or digital product around the things that you do in your day-to-day job? And the reason I say this is because this is how a lot of people get out of the full-time employed structure and into a self-employed structure. They simply find something that they're either already doing or something that they're really good at, and then they create a product, a service, or an offering out of it so that they're not dictated to how they work and how they deliver it, and they can choose the hours that they work, how much they charge for it, and they can build their own business out of it. Now, remember, no one is going to come out of a full-time job and suddenly be equipped to run their own business. But actually, the fundamentals of doing the work when you've got your business up and running, you already know. If we think about it, a lot of the skills that you will have already that you're doing in your job are already monetizable. For example, if you work with spreadsheets in data analysis, for example, you'll probably find that the reason that you're being paid is because you're good at doing data analysis with Excel spreadsheets. And that's because the company has hired you because they have a need for you to do some of that for them because they need that done. There must be demand for those services for you to even have a job doing them in the first place. So what I would suggest that you do is start to research how are other people providing these kind of services and offerings via a digital mechanism. So if you look at what you do, and we use the Excel data analysis example from earlier, we should just simply look online about how you can become a freelancer in that space and what are the kind of things that you might need to do to be able to provide that service. Because if you can still do the thing that you love to do, but you don't have to do it for a company anymore, you remove a lot of the pain points from the employment process. The security is now controlled by you, so you don't have to worry about somebody else making you redundant or firing you or restructuring. And also, you've already got the skills to technically deliver on it. The bit that you'd probably be missing in this area, if you're not an entrepreneur, is how to grow the business in the first place, how to get leads, how to get sales or sales calls in, and how to move forward with the business in the initial steps. And if you consider all of those 3 tips and all of the information I've shared in this video, I'm hoping that this will give you a little bit of a leg up in terms of what you should do next, because nobody should just sit there and accept that they hate their job and just carry on doing it. But at the same time, nobody should be rash, throw the towel in and say, I'm done with all of this. I'm just quitting my job tomorrow because I can't stand it anymore. You need to be smart and think about it carefully before you take any steps and any actions to move forward. And if you already have a plan, then great. Put it to good use. Start thinking about executing on it and make yourself happy. A lot of people fall into sadness, depression, and other mental ailments because they're doing things that they don't like doing. And you need to find out quickly whether that situation applies to you or whether it's just a situation that you can handle by moving to a different job or changing something slightly in what you do. Now, when it comes to potentially monetizing your own skills and things like that, there is a lot to learn. As a starting point, though, I'd recommend that you watch the video on screen next, because I break down 6 steps that will help you get into the situation where you can start growing your own business around a monetizable product or service. So if you click on that video next, I'll see you over there.